The history of heavy.
I am the god of hellfire, and I bring you episode 13 of the History of Heavy podcast. Welcome back, listeners. Welcome to us, new listeners. I am your host, Michael Huntsman, alongside my co-host and dear pal, Dave Lieberman. Dave, how are you?
I am singed. Wow, that was hot. You are hot.
Hot, baby. I'm ready to get into the crazy world of Arthur Brown tonight, my friend. As you know, if you clicked play on this thing or you're watching us on YouTube, we chronicle the history of heavy music genre, song by song, across decades, and we are currently still in the 1960s, the decade of the 1960s. But Dave, this is our last episode to discuss the year of 1968. So that means it is your last opportunity to take us into the cultural corner and walk us through the events of said year before we talk about tonight's topic. So what do you got to close out 1968, my friend?
Dave's Control!
Boy, it's been a long year. So much has happened. I did split this up and talk about things a few month chunks at a time because we had so many songs to spread this cultural corner over. So I've just got a couple of highlights. October 16th, the 1968 Olympics in Mexico City. African-American athletes Tommy Smith and John Carlos raised their fists in Black Power salute after winning, respectively, the gold and bronze medals in the Olympic men's 200 meters. October 25th, rock band Led Zeppelin make their first live performance at Surrey University in England. November 5th, 1968 United States presidential election, Republican candidate Richard Nixon defeats the Democratic candidate, sitting Vice President Hubert Humphrey, and American Independent Party candidate George Wallace. November 17th, known as the Heidi Game. NBC cuts off the final 1 minute 5 seconds of an Oakland Raiders New York Jets football game to broadcast the pre-scheduled screening of the 1968 film Heidi. Fans are unable to see Oakland, which had been trailing 32-29, score 2 late touchdowns to win 43-32. As a result, thousands of outraged football fans flood the NBC switchboards to protest. 1 minute, 5 seconds, 2 touchdowns. Nuts. I'm not a sports guy. I would watch that game. November 22nd, a couple of albums are released. The Beatles, the White Album, and the Kinks are the Village Green Preservation Society. There's an album title for you.
Their greatest album they ever made.
Yeah, this puts them on the map as like cult heroes. So it was a critical flop apparently, but it was very well received in a cult community.
We talk about Bob Mould's Sweat hitting the stage and alternative bands being born. The Village Green Preservation Society was released, and Britpop was born, and Suede and Oasis and Pulp and Blur were all created.
So that's kind of the calendar that closes out the calendar of events, but this was a big year, and so I wanted to hit some highlights of births and deaths. I'm just going to run through them real quick, and you can just ruminate on them and on your own time. Births: Gary Coleman, Josh Brolin, Molly Ringwald, Anthony Michael Hall, Celine Dion, Tracy Lords, Tony Hawk, Kylie Minogue, Big Daddy Kane, Ricky Lake, Will Smith, Tom or Thom Yorke, Ziggy Marley and Lucy Liu. Those are some highlights, and I
And
pulled all of
Michael
them from
Huntsman,
and Michael Huntsman.
right?
These are all from the entertainment industry. Michael Huntsman being the critically acclaimed critic.
Yes, that's right.
Some notable deaths: Yuri Gagarin, the Soviet cosmonaut; Martin Luther King Jr., Helen Keller, Robert F. Kennedy, Upton Sinclair, and John Steinbeck. Big year, big decade, a lot of music going on, and we're going to get into a big song.
We are going to get into a big song. This was what was it, Dave? 1, 2, 3, 4. What was it? Five or six songs we talked about in 1968, I think.
This is number 5.
Okay, yeah. So maybe more songs from this specific year than any other year that we're going to talk about throughout the history.
As I'm looking at the list, I hate to contradict you already, but 1969 is going to be a bigger year.
Okay. Well,
by one.
we'll have a big kickoff for that year next week. But tonight we are talking about a big song, and that song by a gentleman named Arthur Brown, who was a very interesting cat. Arthur Brown was born in North Yorkshire, England on June 24th, 1942. While studying at the University of Reading, he began playing in local bands before moving to Paris in 1966 to study theater. In 1967, he formed the Crazy World of Arthur Brown that also included Vincent Crane on Hammond organ, Dracian Thieker on drums, and Nick Greenwood on bass. Despite being a rock band, the group did not include a guitar player, which is not only unique in general, but very unique to this podcast, which we will talk about. The band quickly generated a local buzz due to their outlandish stage performances, and notably Brown wearing extravagant face paint and a flaming metal helmet. Their debut album, The Crazy World of Arthur Brown, was produced by Who manager Kit Lambert, along with associate production done by Pete Townsend. And the record was released on Lambert's Track Records in the UK and on Atlantic Records in the US in June of 1968. That same month, the album's first single, Fire, and the subject of tonight's conversation, was released and quickly became a transatlantic hit, reaching number 1 in the UK and number 2 in the US, just behind the Beatles' Hey Jude. The song was recorded on 4-track and includes no guitar and no bass. The horns and strings were overdubbed in a different session at Lambert's insistence to mask the out-of-time drumming. Kit Lambert was so unhappy with the drummer's performance that he insisted that they go in and overdub the horns to drown out what he heard as out-of-time drumming, which I thought was interesting. The song's lyrics begin with Arthur Brown's famously proclamation that he is the god of hellfire. And then they go on to explain how he's going to destroy the world and everyone in it is going to burn. That opening line has been sampled and or covered by The Who, Marilyn Manson, The Prodigy, and most notably in my life, prior to really knowing the song, on MTV's Headbangers Ball. Brown's stage image and vocal style have been massively influential on the likes of Alice Cooper, Kiss, King Diamond, Iron Maiden's Bruce Dickinson, which I will talk a lot about in this conversation.
Ghost.
And Ghost and on and on and on. Those influences are a large part of why I wanted to include Fire and Arthur Brown in particular in our conversation about heavy. So that was what compelled me to include it. Dave, what did you think about Fire in the context of our conversation about heavy?
This was my first brush with the Crazy World of Arthur Brown.
Oh, okay. You didn't know this song?
Didn't know this song. Never heard of this guy. Never heard of this phenomenon.
Wow. Okay.
The zeitgeist of Arthur Brown. My first reactions were like, this doesn't seem very heavy to me.
Mm-hmm.
But it importantly belongs in our conversation because it's again, we're at 1968. We're still in 1968, and this is like this is a pivot point for our conversation, and I think for the part of music that we're focusing on. So much has been happening to get us here, and the pivot from before to after is taking a year or two to play out. We had Sunshine of Your Love in 67, which was really like the first paver stone. Like this is, we've got these riffs, we've got these rhythms, and the stuff that came before it was building, right? And then 1968 has been a whole bunch of elements that individually and together are very heavy. And so I think that this belongs in our conversation for some really important reasons, because it is such a influential. It was number 2 on the charts. That's nuts.
Crazy.
That's nuts.
Yeah.
Behind the Beatles.
Yeah.
And so on the one hand, it has a kind of a pop appeal that much of the music in our conversation doesn't and didn't. The popular appeal of this song speaks to that 1 foot firmly in the old, but it takes a giant leap into the new. And his whole thing, the whole brand, and reading up on him a little bit and watching some concert footage, is mind-blowing for the time. It is mind-blowing. And it would have fit right in with the other mind-blowing things going on at the time, including hallucinogens, literally blowing people's minds. So it's really important that we bring him into the conversation. It's hard for me to argue that this particular song is heavy, but this belongs in our compendium, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right. Sonically, if you take away Arthur Brown's image and the stage antics and the stuff, and you take away you change the lyrics, this song is kind of like a Tom Jones, Neil Diamond on stage in Las Vegas energy.
Yes.
There's nothing really sonically heavy about the song at all. But I like to use the word brand. I mean, I think that is really apropos. And when you are looking at the evolution of so many of the subgenres that we have mentioned and that we will be talking about, from shock rock of the Alice Cooper band to the acid rock of Kiss and hard rock to what would become black metal and what would become death metal and all of these things. The seed of that, the theatricality of, you mentioned Ghost, the theatricality of Ghost. I mean, Arthur Brown was doing all of that shit before any of those guys.
Pyrotechnics, baby, right on his head.
Right on his head. And corpse paint, before anybody ever thought to call it corpse paint, he was wearing corpse paint.
Right. And stripping naked and like just doing, he was his own thing. He was writing his own rules and creating the space that he was living in. It didn't exist.
Yeah. He's kind of the embodiment of what I love in an artist or in a musician, whereas he is certainly the sum of whatever his influences were, but he is wholly original. He is playing by nobody else's book. He's not, he's sure, again, drawing from influences or whatever, but that sound, whatever genre you want to call fire, and I want to know what genre you call fire, but whatever it is, it's completely original. He's in a hard rock band that doesn't have a guitar player
or a bass player.
Yeah. Well, yeah, right.
Like what?
Yeah, it makes no sense.
Yeah. Interestingly, organ is featured very heavily here, and listening to some of the other songs on the album, really great organ work. And we had, we had a brush with Inagata Devita and Iron Butterfly bringing organ into this soundscape. And Sister Ray.
Yeah,
you
the
know,
Velvet song. Yeah.
and so we've got Here It Is Again. And it's a part of the sound that's happening, but the texture that this organist brings is carrying a lot, right? Like in Sister Ray, there wasn't drums, right? The drummer was playing the organs.
Right. Right.
And
No,
so
no, there's drums. The bass player, the bass player, John Cale, is playing the organ on
okay,
Sister.
thank you.
There's no bass on Sister Ray.
There's no bass. Okay. And so the organ is able to fill in these blanks that you don't miss. They aren't blanks, right? Like it just does the heavy lifting. And of course, so much music that's played on guitar and performed on, even horns and other instruments is composed on piano.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of songwriters and composers use the piano to create the song, and then they perform it with different instruments. So that's not uncommon. It's just unheard of to hear it in rock. And I can't get over number 2 on the charts, right? Like this is really significant enough to think about as we have this conversation, because so much of the music that we're going to talk about just doesn't brush that close. It's not chartable. And here he is on the charts and in uncharted territory at the same time. I just think that is hugely. It really speaks volumes to his talent and the moment he was able to capture. This is lightning in a bottle. This is that thing that you can never recreate again, and it's totally authentic. Yeah. You couldn't think this up. You can't produce this. You couldn't make this up. This is, like you said, this is the artist expressing their art.
Yeah, you really well said. We talked last week, I think, about how this time in the 60s, how all of this really adventurous and wildly different music was also the popular music of the day, from this to the Beach Boys, to the Beatles, to Jimi Hendrix, to Cream, to Iron Butterfly. Those were all chart topping or adjacent songs, right? That will continue as we go through the next few weeks and we get into things like Zeppelin. Next week we talk about the Beatles and some big bands. But as we start to get into the 70s, the heavy music stops being popular from a charting and sort of, as the popular music for a long time. So this is a very interesting moment in time as it relates to kind of what's charting and what the kids, quote unquote, were listening to.
Right. And some of the music, I don't know that anything else got this high that we've talked about yet. This is number 2. This is crazy.
Yeah, I don't think so. And the UK is famous for, little, interesting tidbits of things in pop music becoming popular for a moment, or them latching on to something that's idiosyncratic or not necessarily mainstream. But to be number 2 in the US, that is so traditionally bubblegum and, very safe and easy is pretty wild.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And, on the organ, when we get to Deep Purple in a few episodes, that's when you will really hear Hammond organ being applied to really kind of capital H hard rock in a way that I think is really interesting. But outside of Deep Purple, this moment through Deep Purple, the organ is largely abandoned in heavy music. You don't hear organ in heavy music at all really today. So that will be interesting to kind of track the the use of different instrumentation through, you know, the chronology of these songs. Talk about. Oh, go ahead.
I just pulled up the Billboard year-end Hot 100 singles of 1968 to give a little bit of context.
Yeah.
Number 1 is Hey Jude, the Beatles. Number 2, Love Is Blue by Paul Marriott. 3 is Honey by Bobby Goldsboro. I think some of these are like show tunes or movie tunes. Sitting on the Dock of the Bay by Otis Redding. People Gotta Be Free by the Rascals. Sunshine of Your Love is in there. The Guys in Love with You, Herb Alpert. Huge. Herb Alpert's big at this time. The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly theme. Mrs. Robinson, Simon and Garfunkel, and The Tighten Up by Archie Bells and the Drells.
Yeah,
So like
a lot of pop in there.
That's the landscape that this got number 2 on the charts. That's crazy.
So what would you classify this song as? You're pretty good.
Yeah, this is tricky. It feels like psychedelic to me, but it's almost like psychedelic Vegas lounge.
Yeah, I read it described as psychedelic soul, which I think is pretty good.
Yeah, okay.
I think I've pushed against the psychedelic tag for a number of the songs we've talked about. This song, I think it absolutely fits, whether you call it psychedelic soul, psychedelic rock, psychedelic pop, psychedelic whatever. But this feels very psychedelic to me. And then visually, obviously, the shock rock tag works really well. He is, I mentioned some of the influences, but he certainly is, again, a precursor to the Alice Cooper Band and to Kiss and to Marilyn Manson and all of, there is that lineage. But sonically, none of those bands have anything to do with Arthur Brown.
Right. And interestingly, if you just heard and didn't see any of the visuals or know about it, if you just heard this song, his vocals are very clear. He has a deep voice. It's crisp. He does have a big range, and they talk about his operatic qualities, not super on display in this song, but it's like a straight performance sonically. But like you juxtapose that with the stage performance, and it's just like kind of bonkers. And like watching the video I saw of him, he's dancing all over crazy and like super energetic, and pulls off his shirt and his chest is painted. And it's like,
yeah,
dude was a phenomenon.
So let's talk about the vocal for a minute. So we talked about the influence of the look and the presentation and all of that stuff. I've known this song for many, 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 many years, and had never, until listening to it for this conversation, noticed how blatantly Bruce Dickinson of Iron Maiden borrowed his vocal style, like his cadence, his intonation, the way he does the talking thing, and it's very dramatic. It's not just the high octave stuff that Arthur Brown does on other songs, Not on Fire, that Bruce, obviously does, the air raid siren stuff. But it's the way the talk singing stuff he does. It's when he lowers his voice like this to, all of that stuff is he sounds exactly like Bruce Dickinson to me. And I've never caught that before.
Yeah, but did Arthur Brown fly the tour jet? That's the thing.
That's a fair point. That's a fair. Well, I never saw Bruce Dickinson wear a hat that was on fire. So.
Well, okay, they're even.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I did hear a lot of vocal influences in his voice.
King Diamond too. King Diamond does that speak sing thing when he's not doing the crazy vibrato thing.
Yeah, I read a quote that listed a half a dozen artists, and the critic was like, "Yeah, it's like all these artists with a little bit of King Diamond, all in the same person."
Yeah, that sounds right. What do you think of this song? Do you like this song?
It grew on me. I do like this song. It's maybe because it feels, and I've mentioned this before, it feels like new old stock to me. This is an old song, but it's new to me, and it has period elements. It feels like a real period piece. And so it appeals to me. It appeals to things I already like that are going on at the time. It's got a little bit of Deep Purple in there, a little bit of Iron Butterfly in there, a little bit of Deep Purple.
Yep.
Or you can see where Deep Purple comes from. You know, they take a lot of cues from a song like this or from Iron Butterfly. Just the energy was frenetic in especially some of the other songs. So yeah, I like the song. I do.
I think we don't often talk about lyrics. You know, we talked about them to some degree on the Louie Louie episode. We talked about them on the Sister Ray episode a bit. We don't usually get too into lyrics. I'm a big lyric guy. I often care what people are saying. It doesn't always matter to me. I like a lot of gibberish stuff too. But this is a really good example to me of a song where I think I would like the song anyway. I love Tom Jones. I think I would like it anyway. But the lyrics and the opening line in particular give it a campiness and a heft and just an energy that wouldn't be there if he was singing about his long lost love or whatever. The I am the god of hellfire thing, and then just talking about people burning for the whole song,
right,
is so great.
Right.
Right, like it again, we wouldn't necessarily be talking about it on this show in this context if not for the lyrics and for the stage presentation. But also the lyrics make me enjoy the song more because it adds to the ridiculousness of it in a really fun, just great way.
Right. And I've mentioned this before in the other podcast about how I find Slayer lyrics to be like this a lot of times, where it's like, what are you saying? Okay, sure, whatever. It goes with the music. It's totally thematic, and I'm here for it. But like, really, okay, all right. It feels a little like that to me, which matches, like it fits.
So let me ask you about that. So I love Slayer. I love their the whole thing. Slayer does not have the slightest wink. They are dead serious in their presentation of the lyrics. They are not kidding around, which is also maybe a little funny. But they want you to believe they believe it. Do you think Arthur Brown is winking, or do you think he's really selling it?
No, I think that Arthur Brown is displaying a performance. And I think that there is a character on stage, and that this is true to that character, that brand. This is a brand. In my experience of it, like he may have taken himself really seriously, but it seems like it feels like, and I could be reading way too much into it, but it feels like he's taking the art of it seriously, and that the art of it is a performance of this flavor, color, shape, and size. Right. And he's creating that authentically and completely and three-dimensionally, truly, sincerely. But I don't know that that's him as much as that's him expressing this thing.
So let me ask it this way. I think you're right. I agree with you. And the way you just described him is more or less the way I would describe Alice Cooper.
Yes.
So let me ask you, and maybe you just answered it, but if Alice Cooper is that, if Alice Cooper is, I'm gonna play fully into this character, this Alice who is on stage cutting the heads off of babies and the guillotine and all the stuff, but my audience gets it. It's like going to theater, and then they, when he is off stage, everybody understands he's just Alice, versus King Diamond, who dresses up and does the whole theatricality thing, but shrouds the mystery off stage so that people kind of, at the time of Merciful Fate and whatever, believed he really was a Satan. And I get whatever he is or not, doesn't matter. But people believe he was a Satanist and, you know, doing all the black magic and all the stuff, that it was real, that's really who he was. I don't know the answer to this and how people felt about Arthur Brown, but do you suspect that the audience in 1968 tilted more toward Alice or King in that analogy or that comparison?
Interesting. So I think that it is, again, it feels like, I don't know this for sure, but it feels more like it would be accepted as a serious stage performance, but like that guy doesn't go to the grocery store on Tuesday with a flaming helmet and face paint.
Right.
You know what I mean? I don't know what King Diamond's shtick is on a Tuesday, but I'm sure he's got to eat, and he's probably going to the grocery store some way, right? But
We
like,
know Glenn Danzig was buying kitty litter, so you know these guys need to get out and get their Costco in. So yeah, it's you got to pick up the essentials at least.
you got to everybody's got to eat.
Right.
So like I don't know how to answer that except to just reiterate what I already had said, which is that like on stage he's all in, but off stage he's a guy who's all in on stage. Alice Cooper is like a conservative, you know, not like very different than one would extrapolate from his on-stage performance.
Right.
I don't get that from Arthur Brown. I get that Arthur Brown is more like a rock star in that they are truly a wild being. Rock stars can be truly wild beings, but like he's in his, like, you can't keep that up off stage like that and make it believable. I don't think.
Agreed. And I'm just looking at our song list. That transition is about to happen to this music. You know, the everything we've talked about in recent weeks, really from the beginning, whether it be Blue Cheer or Iron Butterfly or Hendrix or the Velvets or Cream, this, as we've talked about, was a moment where you were part of a culture or a subculture or a movement.
Yeah.
You know, you all music at that time is you were living it. You know, you were part of this teenage generation that was emerging in the counterculture and thinking about things a different way. And Ken Kesey and the Acetes and Timothy Leary and all of this stuff.
It was a stream of consciousness.
Yeah, and the art was part of the culture. We are about to tip where we start to get into this sort of bloated arena rock stuff where the rock stars start to separate themselves from the community, where you start to produce the Led Zeppelins of the world and the Foghats and those big sort of bigger than Kiss, you know, these bigger than life personas that are very much separating the performer from the audience, where most of the stuff we've talked about before, the artist, even the Beatles, the artists were part of the movement and the community, and that's starting to divide a bit, and it's going to be relevant as we get into some of the songs that we have coming up.
You know who coming up on our list in 1970 feels aligned here is the Stooges.
MC5, I was just going to say, yeah.
And MC5, you know,
sure.
like
Sure.
These two bands stuck out to me as like these people feel aligned, right? Like they have an onstage mode. They're still in that persona off stage, but it's a different aspect of it because it's not in performance, it's the offstage version. So like Iggy Pop is, he's this crazy dude, but like,
Well, you're going to start to have, again, something we've talked a bit about. You're going to start to have that divergence of what becomes punk versus what becomes metal, right? Where the punk guys, the Iggy and the MC5, the Sonics, and as we you start to go into hardcore and all whatever, those guys were all living it. When you
yes,
start to go down this other thing, your Van Halens and your Sabbaths and your whatever, like those guys are musicians performing and working on their craft, but they're not, Ozzy isn't biting the heads off of bats, except accidentally, that is a key divergent between what punk is and what metal is, right?
I think so. I think that that's an important defining characteristic that separates them. Yeah, I think that I would agree with that.
And I think
a lot of the metal is like rock stars just being indulgent, whereas a lot of the punk is like attitude on display and like angst. It just comes out.
Yeah, punk is more obviously destruction, and metal and hard rock is more abundance.
Sure.
We'll get into a lot of that, but I think it's time for song v song. Anything else you want to say about Fire?
No, it was an interesting and kind of, I found it sort of refreshing in all that it had to offer. It was different and unique in a bunch of ways, but it was similar enough to keep me engaged and connect with other music that I like of this time.
Yeah, I love it. And listening to it in the context of our Spotify playlist, cheap plug there, going from Blue Cheer to Fire to the Beatles, I'm always happy to hear Arthur Brown. I'm happy to hear his proclamation every time. I'm like, oh, right on, back Fire. I just love it. And I think to the metal punk, just to put a final cap on that thing, Arthur Brown, I think his feet are firmly planted, obviously in hard rock, but what would become metal versus what would become punk. Not that matters, but I think that that not only sonically but presentationally and the whole thing is more rooted in that world. But it's time for Song v Song. So every week we bring our past champion to the table to fight the new song of the week to see who emerges to go into next week. Both Dave and I share a champion in common. That would be Iron Butterfly's aforementioned In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida, a song we both love dearly, a song that is going to be very difficult to topple. For me, I'll speak first tonight. It cannot be toppled by Arthur Brown. As much as I love The Crazy World and this song in particular, I do love Fire, but it's not In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida, which is a mini masterpiece. So I am going to take Iron Butterfly to next week into a very difficult fight, but that will be for then. Dave, what song are you going to take forward to face the Beatles?
I mean, the fact is, Iron Butterfly's got 17 minutes of organ versus 3 minutes of organ, and it's a blitzkrieg. I've got Iron Butterfly yet again. I love that song, and I too enjoyed The Crazy World of Arthur Brown's Fire, but when it comes down to song v song, In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida is my champion.
Yeah. So, all right. It holds a firm grasp. I love talking about these songs that that I didn't know you didn't know. So it's fun.
There's a lot of them coming up.
That's great. We have a nice little run of lesser known songs and bands coming up that I think is going to be fun. So that will be coming up. But next week we will finally be getting to the Beatles. I feel like we've mentioned them quite a bit. I mistakenly kind of offered them as a next week episode when they were not, in fact. But we do get into 1969 to talk about Abbey Road's I Want You, She's So Heavy. That will be next time. And in the meantime, stay heavy. Thanks, Dave. That was a fun one.
That was a good one. I enjoyed learning about this song and this whole being, the whole thing of Arthur Brown.
He is the god of hellfire. See you next week.
Okay, thank you. Bye.